Alright, this is the wood we're going to be using. Came off a burl from an ash tree. I don't know how well this shows up, but never seen anything quite like this, where it's got this honeycomb like pattern all throughout it. Can already tell it's going to be a pain in the ass to work with, but I'm going to try it. I think it's going to look pretty cool. Already ran it through the planer, planed out pretty good. Actually surprises me for it being kind of brittle looking, but it's a little stronger than it looks. We got our mold here from Crafted Elements. I'm going to go ahead and trim this to fit in place, and we'll figure out somehow to put that in there. It's going to be an awesome Lazy Susan. Okay, so what I'm doing here now is I'm just tracing out a little section of the wood to trim off so it fits properly in the mold. This is just an old Lazy Susan I made that didn't really turn out how I like, so I just use it as a template now. And here I am just kind of cutting off those little edges so it fits in. Go ahead and smooth all that out a little later. Alright, now that everything's been trimmed up, placing it in the mold. I've already gone ahead and sprayed it with some mold release. Make sure you do that, otherwise it's going to stick in there and you won't be able to get it to come out. Before I pour the resin, basically I'm just grinding off the bark, any loose ends, things like that. I always try to do this outside or as far away from my workshop as I can because it makes an absolute mess. Because this wood is so porous and has all these little nooks and crannies, basically I'm taking a vacuum, getting as much dust and dirt out of there as I can before I go ahead and pour the resin. And here's just kind of a close-up. You can tell that honeycomb pattern that I was talking about, and just all the holes, and just a very unique piece of wood. And resin time. I am using my two favorite colors from Eye Candy Pigments, Okinawa Blue and Blue Blood. Often I use tabletop resin for my Lazy Susans, but in this case I'm using a deep pour resin just because the wood is so porous. I want something that's going to seep in and just kind of get into all those little holes. And I needed to mix up just a little more, so here I am just topping off everything. And as always, don't forget to come in with your blowtorch, your heat gun, whatever you want. Take care of those bubbles. Alright, a few days later, everything's dry. It's already got out of the mold. Just popping this 2x4 off. As long as you coat that stuff in Tyvek tape, usually comes off pretty easily. There's the bottom. And now it's time to start running this thing through the belt sander, try to get everything smoothed off. Here we are at the belt sander. This takes sometimes several minutes or more, just slowly feeding it through, little by little, kind of flipping from one side to the next. Takes some time, but as I've said in some of my other videos with it, it's well worth the investment. It'll go ahead and just smooth everything out and get everything level. And here we are, several minutes later. You can see everything's level, everything's flush. However, still got a lot of these little just nooks, crannies, holes, and so forth open. Even with the deep pour, it just really didn't penetrate everything like I thought it would. So we're going to go ahead and just put a nice layer of tabletop over everything and seal it that way. Before I put the tabletop resin on there, I'm just going to sand it a little bit. The belt sander is running a 60 grit belt, and I'm just going to sand this up to 220 real quick just to get some of those big sanding marks out of there before I put the a layer of resin on top of that. And here we are, pouring some tabletop resin on there. You can see the wood still got a lot of that open grain in there, kind of like when we started. And just going to go ahead and spread everything out and just try to apply everything evenly at this point. Once this side dried, went ahead and flipped it over and did the exact same thing to the other side. And of course, don't forget to take care of your air bubbles. And 2 days later, after everything is dried, I'm hitting it with some 100 grit sandpaper, trying to just level and even everything out. And as you can see, some of the holes in that wood were so deep and porous that it basically caused some pits in my layer of tabletop resin. So what that means is I get to do this all over again to try to fill in those little holes and basically anything where the resin didn't take. So like before, I have to do this to both sides, which means that I'm another 2 days into this project. And just like before, 2 days later, here we are again. Feel like it's Groundhog Day. But once again, hitting this with 100 grit. And as you can see here, things are actually starting to take. All the resin kind of filled in where it's supposed to. Takes a little bit of work, but eventually we get things looking like this. And now we're moving up to 180, 220, 320, 400, and so on until we get to the next step. And here I am hitting it with some 1200 grit. Right after that, I move into Festool sanding pads. Use a 2000, then a 4000 grit. And then right after that, we move into their polishing compound. And here I am moving into the polishing compound. This is another Festool product. It is water-based, so it's non-toxic. Great to use on anything you're going to put food on, anything like that. There's 3 steps to it. This is the first one. I think this is 5,000 grit, and then the last one ends at 11,000. And here we are at the best part. Not only am I done after working on this thing for over a week, but putting some mineral oil on it. We can kind of see everything shine, come to life, see what it actually looks like. You look to the left there, you'll see a stack of sandpaper. That's just from basically the last hour here, sand and everything. And one last step, and that's putting the base on. And here we are, the true final step, putting the base on. I get these off of Amazon. They're about 20 bucks a piece. I'll try to leave a link in the description for them. I use these on all my lazy Susans, provide a lot of support, the low profile. Can't say enough good about them, really. And here's the final product. If you actually made it through the whole video and you're still watching, thank you very much. Please consider giving the video a like or subscribing to the channel. Really appreciate it and helps us out. Thanks.